Hello YouTubers. In this video we're going to be working on our 2001 club car. It will not start, and so I've done several things to it thinking I could fix it. So I've replaced the spark plug, air filter, I've done an oil change, oil filter change, put on a new carburetor, and I have tested the spark on the motor to see if I'm getting spark to the spark plug, because all it wants to do is crank, crank, crank. You see there's very little spark there, but it will not crank. Right here like this forever. And I'm thinking that this spark here should be very apparent, should be right in front of my face. I should see it sparking. So my conclusion is, I'm guessing it's the magneto. So the magneto sits behind here, and it is what tells the spark plug when to spark. So there's a magneto, it's a device that sits right around the crank, and as the crank rotates, it tells it spark, 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 right? And so it should do that. My thought is it's not telling it to spark because it's not sensing. And the magneto sits above the crank. I'll tell you the crank, but I'm sure I'll tell you later in the video what it actually is once I learn more about it, because I have not taken it apart and I don't know this to be the case, and I could be talking out my not my mouth. Anyway, so the magneto sits above it and it senses it. It's either gotten too far away or it's broken. I'm speculating. We're going to learn this together, what this is. So, what else have I done? Just kind of catch you up. New battery, fuel filter, fuel pump. All the common things that you would think would prevent something from cranking have been changed. And so it leads me down to thinking it might be the magneto. So that's what we're going to do. First step is I'm going to pull off these shrouds, and I guess we'll just walk through it together. Pull off my spark plug tester. That's like $6 online if you have this problem. But a lot of this stuff needs to come off anyway. The exhaust has got to come out to get access behind here. So intake is going to come off. So let's get some tools, get some gloves, and get the first thing I'm going to do, which I've already done, is the air box. This one just sits in here. It was broken ever since I bought it. Next thing is, let's get the carburetor off. So we're going to undo this clip here, this clip here, and it's held in with two 10mm bolts right here. So we got everything off. I like to set things up how they came off. So this was the first piece furthest back. Then there was a gasket. Then there was this. Then the carburetor, and then the gasket and the intake. All right, so next step. I've already put some penetrating fluid on the exhaust bolts. We're going to be working on those. And I'm also going to be working on getting this panel here off. This is a panel, there's bolts going around it. All 10mm. Probably could use just a wrench or a ratcheting wrench to get those off. And again, this is only a cover, so we're going to remove the cover and undo those exhaust bolts. Here I go, getting ahead of myself. So I removed the cover, and then I started removing the bolts sitting onto this cover. So this one, there's one there. So that particular bolt there, you do not need to take out. You can just unscrew it. All it is has a cutout in there, and the shroud will slide out. You don't need to remove this screw. And I'm just going to feel around. Once I get the part removed, I'll show you where they all are so that you can know what to expect and where to find them. The exhaust bolts are out. So the next thing to get off for the exhaust is this band clamp. So let me get a flathead screwdriver, and then this should just lift out. This should lift out, and we'll see what else we got. Exhaust is out. The band clamp was a 9mm. For me to get this bracket here off, which has got to come off anyway because it's holding the panel in. So we got screw, one right there and one up there. So it looks like a 12mm. Let me grab that and we'll get this as the bracket. And the way it was held in was with bolts and nuts. Bolts went this way. The nuts are on the outside as you're undoing it, here, 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 and here. And then the bracket will drop. So, all right, so we got the part away. That's all we need. We don't need to get it out. And it exposes our magneto. Here it is. Before I take it out, I'm gonna get a current measurement of the clearance between it and the flywheel, or I called it crank earlier. Anyway, I want to get a measurement. It's supposed to be 0.3mm or 12/1000ths. So let me get a feeler gauge and measure the difference between it here and at the bottom down here. It's not a very big device, it's right here. So I want to get a measurement here and here of what it currently is. And there's the space that it's reading. So that's when it knows to fire. As it rotates around, fire, fire, fire. All right, so here's 12/1000ths. Let's see, let me show you what you're looking for. So we want to stick it here, and there is no clearance. We know we're not where it's supposed to be, so it doesn't matter, really. It's wrong wherever it's sitting now in space. There's supposed to be a gap called an air gap between it and it. And that's the 12/1000ths or the 30th of a millimeter. So let me see if I can get to the bottom measurement to see if it's out of round, because it's supposed to be flush. Okay, it was 12/1000ths or 30th of a millimeter on the bottom, but it is not on the top. So it tells me it's cockeyed and it's wrong. Now, this is going back to another issue that I've had on this cart that I think is this. I hear a very, very high-pitched squealing sound from time to time on the motor. And I've never known what it is, but I'm betting this is rubbing against this, causing the chirping sound that I'm hearing, and that's moved somehow, somewhere. So let's get this one out. That looks like a 9 or 8mm bolt holding it on, that one, and there's one on the bottom. You can't see it, but it's there. So this is the original part off. Its orientation, if you recall, was this way. And in reality, when we put the new part on, it doesn't matter which way it goes. It's down the middle, so you could face it whichever way you want. So before I put in the new part, I'm going to scavenge this rubber gasket here and this protector. I ordered a new boot. I don't need the boot for today. We can just click it on when we're ready. In order to scavenge the parts, I cut the end off. This is not going back in, so it doesn't hurt. And we'll just pull this off. Okay, note my orientation. I've got my 12mm, 12/1000ths gauge filler in there. So now I just need to tighten it down, and I'm going to have to do the same thing and make sure it's correct on the bottom side as the top side. So I've gotten everything tightened up. 11/12,000ths of a millimeter up here. Put the rubber gasket back through, and that's it, tightening the bolt. Now for this, for the cover, if you recall, there's a bolt right down here. There's one down at the bottom. There's one at the opposite side of this at the bottom. And then there's one at the back. So those are already in. This one here just needs to be snugged down. Along with that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do here is to put back on this bracket. There are 4 bolts and nuts right here along with the bracket. All right, the next thing we want to do is to put back on this cover we took off around the head and put this bracket back in place. It just sits there, holds the throttle cable in. Okay, we got the cover back on. Now we're going to put back on this bolt because we're about to put back on the exhaust, and that's going to cover that. So we want to get that bolt, this bolt there. I've fitted the exhaust back on, not tightened it up, put the bolts in yet, but it's in place, sitting on the bracket. One thing to note on putting the exhaust in, and that is I would tighten these and torque these first. I don't know the torque specs for these. Say just good and tight before you torque down this bolt or anything else, because these will prevent it from tightening to the head, and you want it tight to the head first. Okay, exhaust is on. I have fitted this cover on. These just take 10mm bolts, wrapping around it. Should be good. Okay, so the next things that go on are associated with the carburetor. Now that everything is tightened up, this bracket here goes on first, and there's a washer or a gasket, and this bracket goes on. Then it is the carburetor. We'll connect up the linkages in just a minute. And then the gasket, and then the intake. Should be good. You can see there's spark coming from the magneto.